Okay, well, welcome to today's episode of InfoSec Journeys. Ashley and I are super excited today to be joined by Ashish Rajan. Thank you very much for joining us. Ashish, you've got such a real passion for information security. I know you work heavily in the security compliance space. You founded your own InfoSec businesses. You've got your own InfoSec podcast, and you live and breathe this kind of environment. And we're super excited to peel you open, find out how all that got started, where all this passion comes from. No doubt talk about your epic beard that you've grown in the course of your career as well, which I'm super jealous of. So before we dive in and talk about where you got started, how you got motivated, etc., let me throw over to you. Tell us who you are and what you're all about, sir.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Colin and Ashley. So love the opportunity and love the community as well. So for me, I started my career in identity and access management of all places. I did a bachelor's in engineering, and the first thing that happened after I did my bachelor's of engineering was my Hotmail account hacked. Not sure how many people still remember Hotmail, but that kind of gives you the age. So that was a motivation for me to kind of start exploring, what is this thing? How did he or she, whoever the person was, so that got my, I guess, curiosity going with the whole hacking stream. Funny enough, a couple of years later, I did a master's and I thought, okay, pen testing is going to be the thing for me. Then I realized I have to read a manual, and that pretty much at that point, I'm like, nah, fuck it. I just can't read a manual. This is not me. So I took the other path of I got an internship for an identity and access management, internship program. Started doing internship in a company called CA Technologies, which doesn't exist anymore, actually. And slowly moved towards cloud security. Did security architecture for some time, did SOC, managed a SOC team, started participating in a startup, which was a startup out of here in Melbourne. A few of us decided that cloud is the future and we want to invest in it. So invested 6 years into it, grew the team from me, the little old me and my boss before I left, we were 30 people in security. And I think we were 400 people in total in the company within a span of 4 years, with offices in Singapore, US, and we were opening one in Dublin, but COVID happened. So yeah, now I work as the head of security for a company called PageUp.
Awesome.
Nice.
How did you? That's fascinating, right? Because you were with a group of guys out in Melbourne, and throughout your conversations and your knowledge, you were like, "Cloud is the way to go." How did you know that? Like, how did you spot that opportunity to develop in that space?
It's a great question, actually. And I still feel I haven't been able to find a great answer for it. But it took me a couple of years to actually find an answer, which I still feel doesn't justify the passion that I saw in people around me. So the people that I was working with, the ones that started the startup, we were the first company, or I guess the founders were the first folks to move their website into cloud, into AWS, Amazon Web Services, for people who may not know. And that was a moment that when we were talking about it, it became like crystal clear. Why would you not do this? And the whole conversation about, it's so much more cheaper in cloud, and it's so much automation can be done. Like, you don't have to wait for hardware for, like, I don't know, like the fastest that I heard that I got was 40 days for a piece of hardware. For some people may laugh at this, like, what are you talking about? Like, right now you just swipe a credit card and you get, I don't know, like a 15 GB RAM or 50 GB RAM, and it's just a matter of how much you want to pay for it. But there used to be this world, I'm sure you guys would have seen it as well, where it's on to have to do capacity management. Was a meeting that I had to sit into to talk about how much capacity do I need for the rest of the year. And I have to estimate enough that I can withstand my peak performance. So conversations like those were not a thing in cloud. That's what fascinated me. And coming from a security angle, I think because I used to host a meetup called DevSecOps Meetup, which we, unfortunately, because of the COVID thing, we haven't done any physical meetups, but we're probably going to do online meetups. But the whole idea behind automating security and the fact that that allowed me to venture into other parts of security, which was not accessible for me before. Coming from an identity and access management background, you're basically working in the IAM field, and you're not going out anywhere because you get pigeonboled into it. But cloud made it possible that identity became the crown jewel to access this kingdom. And that was my entry into security architecture for cloud. That was my entry into like SOC teams, threat intelligence, and like so to your point, that's where I'm like, oh my God, this is my opportunity to expand and not just be that identity guy forever.
That's so true, isn't it? Because when I look at the cloud, like I've got some experience with Azure, but not necessarily AWS or GCP, etc. But I think, and I recently had a look at all of the kind of features of AWS, and the respective kind of security side of managing the cloud. And I was a little bit bamboozled. I was like, oh my God, there's so many products here, and there's so many different naming conventions and solutions, and areas of this infrastructure. But then, actually, when I boiled it down, I feel like if you can understand three key things, first being like data at rest encryption, and then second being network security and security hygiene, like firewall rules and stuff. And then the third, most important, as you said there, is identity access management, right? So if you've got the capability to manage properly and securely that identity access into this environment, it's a massive. You're almost like the kind of gatekeeper, the keys to the kingdom.
Yep.
Able to control that environment and have a real good wrap around it. Because I feel like I'm waffling here, but I feel like some businesses who are embracing the cloud, like they're not fully cloud, they haven't moved everything over, they've got a little bit of both, and they're sitting in both camps. Like the cloud's a little bit like the Wild West for them at the moment, and I think companies that go like all in, like if their people are focused on the cloud and stuff, then you have that kind of good wrap around it. I guess out of this waffle, my question to you is, what kind of challenge do you see businesses facing when they're moving to the cloud? I feel like people have been saying fucking moving to the cloud for the past 10 years. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Cloud, yeah. Cloud transformation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. Digital transformation, cloud transformation. Yeah.
Some people made a lot of money out of this and
oh yeah,
absolutely
100%.
zero work. Yeah.
Oh my God, 100%. And there were people who would help you realize digital transformation. I'm like, I don't know what that does, but they don't do anything technical, but they just tell you how you can digitally transform. But if you look at the slide deck, the one message that comes across is move to cloud or move to API model. That was the digital transformation. I'm like, what? We paid 50 grand for this? They could have just told us on the phone call. But to your point, there are still people who haven't moved. And I believe the reason for this is also, even though we talk about there's so much compute available, sometimes there's still not enough compute available for certain technology. Like, for example, if you're talking about the banking sector, there is not enough compute for mainframe on cloud yet. You just cannot move it. Like, they're still trying to work through it. They're trying to create their own hardware to address it, but they haven't been able to work that out. So those guys would always be hesitant. Plus, obviously, there is the whole data sovereignty thing as well. Like, for example, coming from, I guess, I was going to say across the ditch for you guys, but it's not even across the ditch. It's like across the continent for Melbourne. It's like, so for us over here, Australia, New Zealand, Australia is the only country where there's a data center from AWS, whereas Microsoft has a data center both in Australia and New Zealand. So to your point about Azure, someone who's looking at Azure might pick Azure over AWS because just for data sovereignty in New Zealand, if they want to keep the data in New Zealand, they just have to go to Azure. They can't go anywhere else. So they want to move to cloud, but there's restrictions. So there are people who are at different stages of digital transformation, quote unquote. And the way they've kind of gone about it's kind of like the kind of two models. One is the lift and shift model, where basically just as it sounds like, you lift something from data center, place it exactly as it is onto the cloud. It's probably not the best thing because it would definitely cost you more, and it would definitely not be a great experience for your overall team because they feel like they're in the cloud but with handcuffs on because you can't really move this piece. the other piece to transformation is where you transform the entire application into microservices, and you talk about, let's use cloud native services as people call it. What is it the cloud is providing me that I can use so that I can just completely get rid of a web server? I can completely get rid of a load balancer. I can completely get rid of a firewall thing or a proxy. Like that's kind of what I feel is the stage that certain companies are in. And to your point about why some people are still talking about moving to the cloud is also because a lot of people went into it and said, oh, fuck, it's too expensive. Don't go there. They told all their friends about it, and all those friends are not going in. They basically said, Joe Blow told me that it's a bad idea. He ended up spending millions on it, and he didn't and he was told he would be saving money. So that's one reason as well.
I think if you don't understand like the nature of how the billing structure works, how you're actually going to pay for these services, you've got to go into it with your eyes wide open, haven't you? And have a real kind of grip on it, because the perception of how much it's going to cost you can definitely put you off. I mean, even in like the personal space, people are spinning up little instances to do SQL queries or whatever, or a bit of brute forcing and stuff like that, and all of a sudden you forget about your AWS instance you've left running for a little while, and then you get a big massive bill at the end of it. Well, that's all. You knew what you were kind of getting into when you signed up for it. You pay more attention. Yeah, I guess.
And I think it's scary as well. I mean, all of us are professionals as well, so I can probably talk in another example where the capacity management meeting that I was talking about earlier, where there was a procurement process. You're like, oh my God, I need to get these X number of machines in. In the cloud, there is no procurement process, right? As an individual, you just can, if your company says, sorry, you can't go to cloud, you're like, okay, fuck it. I'm just going to swipe my credit card and start putting that's going to be my dev environment, because I hate working on this laptop, the crappy old laptop that the company gave me, right? And all I have to do is just SSH into this box, and I get access to 16 GB RAM and whatever.
Yeah.
And that's actually scary as well, if you think about it from a security perspective, because you're like, that you don't have any idea how much of shadow IT has been created in cloud in your company. And there is no way you would find out, because they would have used their personal email for it. So unless you do like a OS init project that Ashley was part of, to find out all the missing shadow IT in cloud, that could be one way. But yeah, that's kind of like where it definitely makes me nervous. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of vendors make a lot of money doing that, selling those types of solutions. A couple things from me: Azure or Azure?
Yep. Oh,
which one is it?
Because
I say Azure, and then I spoke to someone at Microsoft in the week, and they were like, "It's Azure." I'm like, "Is it? Are you sure?
Yeah,
are you Azure?"
I am Azure, but to your point, I know a few of the Microsoft guys, and they all say Azure, and I'm like,
Azure.
Sure, yes, it's Azure, because AZ or AZ, or like it's one of those ones, like tomato kind of a thing. It's like. But yeah, it's Azure for me.
Why do you think people find the cloud so difficult? So like in the early days, S3 buckets were being left open constantly.
Mm-hmm.
People were getting caught left, right, and center, leaving elastic clusters open to the internet, and just doing really, really poor IAM. What I'm trying to say is really poor. Access management. The access management was terrible. The hygiene was poor. So why do you think that was? Do you think there was not a lot? People just didn't understand how the cloud worked, or they configured things and just left them open because they thought, well, no one can access that. I did it through the AWS portal.
I think it's funny. I call it a bloke thing as well. You know how sometimes when you go to IKEA, you get a furniture. How many times you actually read the manual? Like, it's like, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't read the manual. I try it. And when the time I mess up is when I actually read the manual. Like, okay, am I missing a screw?
Yeah.
I feel it's a similar thing with all of these things as well. Azure, AWS, GCP, you name it, because it doesn't take you long. You see all your friends getting Azure certificates, AWS certificates, and like, what is this thing that LinkedIn is filled with all these people like, oh my God, 500 likes on this guy who got an AWS solution architect associate. What is this thing? And then you watch a bunch of YouTube videos and like, oh, it's so easy to start. I'll start one. So you go in there. And the funny thing is, right, something so small, and I still remember this, the first time I got in there, by default, AWS takes you to North Virginia region. By default, like that was the thing back in the day. I don't know if it's still or if it recognizes my cookies and puts me in Sydney, but even that is something like almost like a concept that doesn't exist. Like, because when people like us, I keep counting you guys in, but feel free to say you didn't see that world. But in a world of data centers where if you were to work with someone in the, say, you guys in the UK, I'm in Australia, if you were to work together, I'm walking into my data center in Melbourne. You're walking into your data center in the UK. I do not have access to your machine unless I go through this sophisticated firewall. I don't know, 4 or 5 firewalls and 25 MFA later. Like, oh, finally I get access to the UK data center. But in the cloud world, it's just a drop down, and you click on it, and you're like, oh, now I can build resources in Dublin. Oh, sweet. There you go. Now I've got resources in North Virginia. And you forget about them. You move on. And then you forget that when you log in, you're back in North Virginia, but your Dublin instance is still running. You have 25 servers still running in Dublin, which you were testing. So you go into your server. Oh, no servers. Great. I'm just going to log off and go back home. And as Colin mentioned, a month later, you get a bill. And like, how the hell did I get this bill? Because you didn't swipe that thing. And I feel like there was a lot of excitement behind cloud, and there still is, because people like, I guess I kind of blame myself for this as well a bit, because I've been hooting the cloud security thing for a while, that people should go into cloud, but go do it the right way. But because it's exciting, kind of like all the techies are like, I need to know about this. I don't know what it is. I don't know. I sound like a Trump. I was just like, I don't know what it is. I'm like, I kind of entered in Trump mode there. But they basically say that it's the sheer excitement of trying something new that got people going, and they didn't want to read the manual. They didn't want to know what services were there. And some people even blame the cloud security providers for this as well, because they also say that, well, if you took security that seriously, you should have put these things in place in the beginning. You didn't have to wait for someone to accidentally open an S3 bucket. You could have just let that be in the beginning. But to think about, and I want to balance it out. I don't want to blame it completely on cloud security providers. Imagine a world where you guys are the first people to talk about cloud, that I'm going to give you a data center on a console, and you're trying to convince people to use it. And then, like, no, you're not even talking to the government. You're talking to startups. You're like, how do I get this thing running quickly? And you're like, well, there you go. It's always public. So the first versions, if you go back to, I think it was 2010 or 2011. So it's been like 8-9 years since AWS kind of became a thing. And the first version was just a public S3 bucket. That's all you could do. It was just literally a Dropbox. That's all pretty much. I mean, for lack of a better word, it was just a Dropbox. Now, as they kept adding services, they realized, oh, these people want security. Oh, we should put security. So, it's only when people are asking for it, because they've always worked in a startup model. Whereas people who came in later on, after all these mistakes had been done by AWS for leaking S3, well, not AWS leaking S3 buckets, but people accidentally leaving S3 buckets open. Azure, Google Cloud came in, they said, oh, we do security differently. And Microsoft, being in the enterprise space for a very long time, much more longer than AWS, they came with that mindset. This is how it should be done. Although they do screw up people with different kinds of licensing for identity, but that's a different story. Google Cloud comes with a similar thing as well. Like, everything, your permission is tied to your G Suite account, which is not a thing in IAM, which in AWS, I don't know if you guys know this, but there are actually 4 kinds of identities on AWS. One is like the actual user that you can create within AWS. Then there is the single sign-on user that you can do on AWS. Then there is the, for lack of a better word, a service account, what I call them robot users. Basically, your server can perform actions. And then there are third-party users who have requested access to your AWS accounts because they want to help you manage it. They want to help you manage costs. They want to help you manage security. So there are already 4 kinds of identities floating around at any given point in time in a large cloud environment. There is no way you can find all this information out. And that's my current contention with cloud. And people are kind of slowly moving into a space where they're realizing that cloud needs to be done better. But to your point, there are still people jumping in who have no idea about cloud. They go in with swipe card because they say it's free for first 30 days, as every other SaaS provider. You try it and you let me know how you go. Then, that's kind of where they land. And I know it's a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives you the
definitely. So do you think then, like, from traditional businesses with on-prem hardware and data center kind of architecture and stuff like that, do you think the main kind of challenge is actually around education, like retraining skills from their security architecture or engineering teams and or even the development teams and stuff like that? Do you think it's all about I guess the question is, and the challenge is that training budgets within organizations always tend to be quite challenging, right? There tends to be probably, I would imagine, one of the first budgets that gets cut when there's, COVID hits and people are, kind of saving money, etc. So, right, okay, well, let's can all the training for this year. And then, so how do people kind of learn this stuff? I guess it's a challenge, isn't it?
It is. And I think to your point, fortunately, there are quite a few people who have started recognizing this as well. I mean, there are a few providers. If you just want to learn about cloud, I would say you can go on plenty of YouTube videos for free content. But if you don't mind paying, I think it's only $10, $20. There's a service called A Cloud Guru or Pluralsight. Those guys have started having content for this, which is pretty good. And they have student kind of options as well. But for professionals who are trying to upskill, I definitely feel you definitely need a different kind of training, because you have so much. Like I'll put someone who already has a job as an example. You've been doing data center security for, I don't know, 10, 20 years already. And now you're looking at, okay, this cloud thing, fuck. All right. Okay. What am I going to learn this now, or what am I going to do? So I definitely feel there is a base foundation already present for all these people with experience. All they need is just like, how does it translate from on-prem to cloud? That they just want the translation, because it's not like all that you've learned in data center for 20 plus years is a waste. It's just that you just want to know what's the translation. So when I mentioned earlier that you can replace a load balancer server with something as a service, like, oh, there's a translation there for you. So I don't need a physical box for a load balancer. I can just use a service in cloud, like that kind of translation. And it's funny. I don't want to plug in my Cloud Security Academy there, but there are plenty of other people as well who are talking about this and sharing their knowledge and doing it the right way. I definitely would say that a lot of courses like the A Cloud Gurus and all the other ones, they want you to get into cloud quickly. They want you to understand the service security quickly. So so I'll give you an example of a lesson that they would have. They would have a lesson where, let's make a public website. They would open an S3 bucket, make it public, and put a bunch of files in there. And like, go do it yourself. People go start doing it. Now, when they come back to their offices, they're like, you tell them, I need an S3 bucket. Do you know how to do it? Yes, I know how to do it. They just go in and just make a public S3 bucket. There you go. That's the bucket. So it's kind of like, if someone who's listening to this and they do go into A Cloud Guru and all these other courses, I would ask them to kind of like take it with a pinch of salt, because some of those trainers are really knowledgeable in cloud, but they might not be explaining from security, and rightly so, because the course is not about security. The course is about the cloud service. So it's not their fault. It's like, you can't assume that everyone wants to know security. So it's almost like there is training available, and definitely upskilling and education is a gap that's slowly becoming a problem for a lot of people. And to your point, fortunately, at least in Australia, they allow you to claim on tax the education, but I'm assuming there's a similar version in UK and other countries as well. So I'll definitely ask people to kind of upskill and get into that space and claim all that money.
So do you reckon then, like somebody starting out in InfoSec wants to break in, or maybe they've got their first role and they're looking to kind of progress? This would be a kind of good area to focus on in their development. You talked about AWS certificates from like Pluralsight, etc.
Yep.
Do you think that's a good kind of thing to have on the CV, the resume?
I think it's definitely a good start. Let's say that. It gives so. If I'll be honest, if I'm hiring someone for a cloud security engineer kind of a role, I probably, if I see an associate certificate, my instant thought would not be, oh my God, this guy or girl knows AWS. My instant thought would be, because I've done that certificate, it would be, they know about the services in AWS. It's just that they don't know how it's implemented, what kind of project it would have been. So they're definitely a great start. If you can find some form of projects that you can do in cloud, probably a better way. And I definitely feel one thing to call out, and this is what I tell other people, that having a knowledge of cloud is definitely an advantage over someone who doesn't know a cloud in any organization right now. So to your point, having a certificate is definitely an advantage. So if you are a security person applying for a job, the moment they see an AWS certificate or an Azure or GCP certificate, and they are in that space, they would hire you. Because as I was talking about, old people like me who have been spending a lot of time in information security, we're all transitioning. I'm still trying to, every time there's someone who tell me about a service, I'll try and map it to something that I knew from before, so I may sound intelligent when I'm talking about it. But for anyone who's new, they have the advantage of learning a new thing without the bias of what it used to be. So they definitely have an advantage. So as a person who's hiring, I would be like, oh my God, this guy knows cloud. Like anyone who comes with a GCP knowledge, I'll hire them, because if I have a Google Cloud instance, I have no idea how to run it. So I've got people who know how to do it. I work with them. But if I have someone in my team who knows about Google Cloud, I'm like, oh, yeah, bring them on 100%. I think that's the way I think people would approach it.
Yeah.
How do you so we spoke to another podcast guest, and he was deep AWS as well, but with a lot of the organizations I work with, they're Azure. So how do you keep pace with these clouds, or how do you keep I hear a lot of vendors say multi-cloud, and whenever I hear the word multi-cloud, I think, what is it? What is even multi-cloud? So, like, how do you keep pace?
Polycloud, but sure, yes.
Yeah, polycloud. Yeah, because it's like, how do you keep pace? Because I get emails from AWS every week. Here's a new service. Here's a new service. Like, it almost seems impossible. Like, if I was starting in the industry now, I think it'd be too daunting to go into to even think about looking in cloud. Like, how do you do it? How do you keep that information flowing?
So it's a great question, and I think it's a valid question as well, because because Amazon, the Jeff Bezos is going to be the first trillionaire on the world, right? And Amazon is the biggest customer of AWS. So that's the level of the staff they have to work on this, right? So just to do a one-to-one comparison of like average company, like I don't know, Joe Blow, or I'm trying to think of a company like British Telecom. Let's just take that as an example. Pretty big company, lots of employees around the world, but they still would not be able to match the number of employees doing development in AWS.
It's amazing.
So the scale of it, you almost feel like you can't even match it. Even if you sat there 24/7 skimming through every news article coming out, they have a team of at least 20-30 people working on each service. It's not entire AWS that they're working on. They're working on a service in AWS. And you look at that and go, oh, I probably should just you can choose to give up, or you can just go down the other path and go, there are core services which are applicable in your industry. I can name a few, so people kind of go, okay, every time a news article comes about this particular service, I should look out for. Everything else I can ignore. Like, for example, their version of a server is called EC2 instance. People still use it. Everyone who's done a lift and shift from what we were talking about earlier, they've all still use EC2 instances. There is, for people who enjoy containers, there's a container service. so they can translate that skill set into AWS or Azure or GCP. The same goes for people who are enjoying serverless these days or Kubernetes. So there's a direct, what these cloud providers thankfully have done is A, they do not care that you can't keep up, but B, they realize that because we are the ones who are paying money for it, they do want to listen to us. So they do have services which we understand. So if someone is listening into a feed, because you will get like every service, there's ML service, there's transcode service, like, which you would never use on a day-to-day basis unless you're transcoding this podcast, I guess. So that's one use case. But the way I do it is I focus only on the services. I only look at the AWS security blog, and I look at the services that are being used in my company. And no matter which interview you go at, if someone's asking you to be aware of what happened yesterday in an AWS S3 bucket, that's pretty ridiculous. It's kind of like asking 10 years experience in cloud security, and you're like, I don't think people have done cloud that much to have 10 years of experience in cloud security, but sure, because you have it written over there, I'm going to say yes to it and pretend that was just it's kind of one of those ones. You almost feel
I always find when people put that on their job requirements, I've never been asked in interviews. So tell me, how many years experience and where did that start? Like, no one gives a shit, really, do they? It's just they put it on the initial filter to probably I'm assuming, kind of weed out some noise before you get to be sat in front of an interviewer. Like, I've had roles where it's like, you need X amount of years experience reverse engineering malware, and I thought, well, fuck that, I'll just go for it anyway. And you do, and no one asks me. You know what I mean?
Actually, that's a good question. I never realized it until you mentioned it, Colin, that no one's ever asked it, because you're asking like questions about the technology, the problems you solved, like, and these 10 years of experience you've had, how many times did you have, like, no one would ask that question. I just never had that in my career.
Well, there's a good interview question for your next candidate. I feel sorry for who the next person is you're going to interview now.
Like, how many years did you say you have? Oh, right, 5. Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been, like, out of these 5 years, how much time have you spent in cloud? Were you updated on feed? Did you see the news that came in yesterday? And like, sorry, like, what about this morning? Yes, just to scare people off as well. But
so from the beginning, so what was your early life like? What dipped you into technology? Have you always been a technologist, or did you growing up, did you want to do something else? Did you want to be a barber, for example? Look at that hair on your head.
Now I probably would have loved to be a barber. Right now with the because Melbourne is in lockdown and none of the barbershops have been open for 4 months. Like, with my wife who's been helping me cut the sides, but the top has been, and the beard has been growing for a while. So.
You should definitely keep it. You're a handsome man. So.
Thanks, Colin. I should probably make sure you get me the recording of this podcast so I can make my wife listen to this. So, like, there are other people who think I look good in a beard.
Absolutely.
To answer your question, I think I've always been in technology, and I think it probably is a default for being brown, I guess, because you kind of have computers always around you, and it just becomes so. I don't know about you guys, but in an Indian background, you only have 2 options when you grow up. You either join medicine or you join engineering. And even in engineering, you kind of have to pick which is popular for that season.
Yeah.
So turns out when I was growing up, the season was for computer science, because everyone's talking about computer science. So my dad got me my first Intel Pentium Celeron with 128 MB RAM. And I was like, 128 MB hard disk. It sounds like too much now when I think about it, but that was my first intro into it. And walking around with my hard disk was like a thing that I used to do with my friends. I would pull out the hard disk from my CPU and walk around to my friend's place to copy stuff in there. Or take movies from him. By the way, don't pirate movies. It's a bad idea. Just saying. It's like, this is how the first version of torrent happened. People were walking around with their hard disk. That used to happen. So yeah, I kind of have always been in technology, but I didn't realize I had a side for fashion as well for a while. Fashion and the whole culture aspect of it. So to your point, growing up, I still probably would have still done technology, but I probably would have gone to fashion tech or something. And now I think I probably would have, because I would have think that, oh, being brown, I probably would get the technology thing anyways. Not that it would be a stereotype, but fashion is something that I wasn't doing much because my dad used to have a business of clothing. And growing up, I would just see all these different kinds of clothes. He's talking about all these colors that don't match together. I'm like, what is he on about? But after being an adult, when I could start paying for my own clothes, I started realizing actually some of that opinion had flowed into me, and I would have an opinion about, say, the kind of outfits I would wear, and yeah, that I probably would have chosen another profession, but probably still related to technology, fashion tech, probably.
Yeah, that's really cool. Very interesting.
Cool. So it's really interesting. You actually you brought up something I wanted to discuss with you, and it wasn't the fashion. Sorry to say that, but basically, the Indian culture around being into engineering and into technology and into science is something that I've never researched. But if you look at the top Silicon Valley startups and big enterprises today and big technology companies, most of the people at the top or in the C-suite are Indian. Yep. So and I feel that the Indian people don't get enough recognition for what they are doing in technology. And do you think that's a valid point? And also, why is that? Like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? What is the mindset of the Indian people to be so good in the technology field or in technology leadership? Is there something that we're missing here in the West, which is going on in the Indian culture?
Oh, I think it's the hardcore parenting is missing. I guess like, you get me. Well, I kid, but the reason I feel, and my wife and I talk about this thing, where when you live in a third world country, right? I think so when you don't have a good job, the only other option is homelessness, and you're outside begging, basically. Like that is very real. Like, I mean, we're all in Commonwealth countries. UK is a Commonwealth country. Australia is a Commonwealth country. So even if, God forbid, you don't have a job, there is some support system from the government, right? So you can still access that. And some people can call it their right to access it. But for a lot of, I guess, for the entire population of India, you're probably, or even any third world country for that matter, you're on your own. Yeah, there's no support. So when you get into something, I feel like the reason I was talking about the season being that you only get two options, engineering or doctor, is because those are two professions where you make a lot of money. So parents are thinking that, oh, if my son or my daughter is doing engineering or medicine, they're bound to get a good job. They will get paid well. They would have a good life. So that's like drilled into us growing up. You need to be able to get a good job. You need to be able to excel in your job, work hard, like that thing. And it's funny, sound like a kind of like cliche, but if you say that in someone in a Western culture, they'll get that as well. They're like, yeah, I should work out. Oh, sorry, I should not work out, but I should definitely work out, but I should definitely work hard. But I feel the piece which missing is, it's so real that you could literally be on the street next tomorrow if you don't get a good job. That it's kind of like, if you know you're gonna, I mean, for lack of a better example, if you know you're gonna die tomorrow, you'll put this today. You would do everything under the plan today to make sure that you've done, like, you fulfilled your destiny. I feel that's that's what drives people. And I'm not saying that only people who grew up in India have that. Yeah. I do see that in people who have moved overseas. So I still see that in my parents. Like, my parents still talk about that even after moving overseas for so many years. They still talk about, oh, you should get a good job, work hard, make sure you're always humble. It's not about being boisterous. It's always about being humble as well. You should keep your head down. I'm like, I don't think it comes with me by nature, but sure. I kind of like I think I've got an Instagram handle called Peacock in the Room for two reasons. But and I'm like, my dad, like, you definitely are not someone who's gonna keep quiet in the room. I'm like, yeah, I do know that, but because it's like, it's one of those things. I feel like, and majority of them are trained in the model that you can't have to be modest about it. You can't be outright like, oh, I know this. But I feel like, to your point, that's what's missing in the Indian folk. I don't think it's the Western society's fault. You guys have the same options as we do. It's just that it's more, it's basically you're begging on the street. That's kind of like makes it very real, because you walk out, there's a beggar on the road, like, shit, that could be me. So I'm going to go back to my office. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I wonder whether the kind of situation with COVID and the effect that that's had on the remote working culture across the globe, how that will change things. You know, if the opportunities to, you know, if you're in India, there's a lot of, you know, the economy is unbelievable in India, and, you know, to go and work in a big organization and to get that good career move, I guess, you know, even 5 months ago would be all about physically being in the right location by those offices to go and commute there to get that job. And now there's almost like a global jobs market coming, you know, on the horizon where people can work remotely. No one gives a shit where you work anymore.
Yes, that's right.
You know, if you've got the knowledge and the capability to contribute, then, you know, hopefully the opportunities have become more prevalent for people.
Yeah, 100%. I think people are recognizing it as well, because that's why a lot of research centers have opened up in India as well. So a lot of the research centers, whether it's within cloud security or whether it's Adobe, Google, Microsoft, there's a reason why they have their research centers there. They don't have their call centers there. They have their research centers there, because they realize there's a lot of people who are just being bred to be really good engineers. And it's like anything, right? If all of us become really amazing podcasters, like, I don't know, we become Joe Rogan, I guess, people were like, oh my God, these guys were born to be like, you know, like, that's right. I mean, you know, it's one of those ones, the more you practice, the more better you get. The same goes for them, but for them, it's being drilled into them, and since they're a kid. Like, since you're a kid, I mean, no one told us to be podcasters when we were an adult. So we kind of like, I mean, at least I'm picking it up as I'm going. So I still have a lot of ums and ahs that I have to edit out of videos. But it's one of those ones where I feel that COVID has definitely changed the way people look at jobs now. I am surprised that the dream that we used to be sold in IT, that you could work from anywhere, it took a COVID for it to become a reality.
True. Yeah, that is so true. Yeah, it's unbelievable. What kind of keeps you? You're so passionate. You're like overflowing with passion for info security. I really love speaking to you. Where does that come from? And how do you stay motivated to work in this environment? Like, where does that fire? How does that continue to burn? What is feeding that fire?
It's a deep question as well. I have I don't actually how many people know this, but I actually have a Patreon account where I kind of do talk about this, because I don't talk about it otherwise publicly. I have this desire to open a cybersecurity academy with free education for anyone who wants to join. You only have to pay when you get a job. And it's basically a referral. You refer. So either you pay with money or for the course you did, or you just refer another person to the course. That's pretty much
nice.
That's my end goal. If I can reach that before I retire, that'll be amazing. So Cloud Security Academy that I started is basically first stab at understanding the education market, because I don't even know. Like, I had this desire, like, what is going to be my legacy if I were to leave one? And I would read about these tweets that there's a skills shortage, there's a gated community, cannot get into cybersecurity because these guys want a CISSP with 10 years experience. Like, I can't get this for a junior role. Like, there's not many junior roles. So my hope is to provide that, and this is something that I'm doing with Cloud Security Academy. The intent is not just that you do a course and thank you so much for your money and move on, but more to get you that job, have agencies that I work with to make sure you get a job, to the end-to-end thing. Not that you've done a course, thank you. I've got another course coming next month. If you guys want to sign up. Like, you know, I don't want that, because I feel like that. Yeah. I don't think money is a challenge for me, fortunately, touch wood. But there's a bigger goal that keeps me motivated, and I think my wife and I have spoken about this quite a few times as well, because she's got a philanthropic angle as well, because she's into Muay Thai and everything, which is martial arts. She wants to teach self-defense to women in India when we get old. And so I think we've had this thing, and she's doing a lot of work in that space. She's training for it. She has a startup as well now to kind of that would feed in the education. Yeah, I think that's kind of where it's coming from. I definitely want to reach that goal, but I can definitely, it should not be like people should feel there's a gate that they have to jump across to get into cybersecurity, which funny enough, there is no gate that I mean, I don't know if both of you feel it, but I don't think there's a gate to get into cybersecurity.
No, I don't think there is either. I mean, and I saw a post on LinkedIn this week about someone feeling that the cybersecurity was a gated community and there was no way to enter this because of, I call them the cybersecurity celebs, and you see them being, 20 years experience, certificates, crazy amount of certificates, crazy amount of connections, and they know everyone, and they feel like, well, I'll never get to that place. But, since we've been doing this podcast, I feel, well, anyone can get into cybersecurity. There is so many roles in this field. You can be technical, you can be non-technical, you can do recruitment, you can do pretty much anything. You could forge your own path. You can make your own startup if you want to. Yeah, you could sell multi-cloud to people. But
multi-cloud transformation.
Yeah, multi-cloud transformation.
A 50-page slide for $50,000. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Blockchain. Dark web. You could do anything you want, but I think it just takes that work ethic. It just requires a little bit of work ethic. And you've got to view yourself as your own personal brand, and don't worry about the company you work for. I mean, yes, you work hard, but also work for yourself. And that's what I believe, and I see that in you. Like, you have your own personal brand. I mean, you have a photo of yourself behind your head. So, I mean, like,
yeah, that's right. That's my imaginary cafe for you guys. Yeah, that's right. I would love to own a cafe one day, by the way, just saying. And that's the image of the cafe that I want.
Oh, brilliant. See,
I love this goal.
Yeah.
It's so true. The fact that you have these goals, both long-term, short-term, in your business and personal life, that's really inspiring to hear about, if I'm honest with you.
Appreciate that.
And also, I dare say there'll be so many people listening to this that will resonate with, to think, do you know what? Life is not all about information security and what have you. It's the kind of how you're going to make ends meet at the end of the day to hopefully live a more fulfilled life.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think thankfully as well, it is a community or an area of employment where it's quite lucrative as well if you're you know what you're doing and can play the game. And so I feel like there's a lot of people that can accelerate on that personal goal journey, and sometimes it takes a little bit of money to make you feel comfortable to realize
100%. I know someone who started off as a DJ, realized, actually a friend of mine as well, she started as a singer in a band, and she got into cybersecurity through one of the guys who was in the band, and they were, you should do cybersecurity, you seem to be good at this. And she's like, what? No. And so she, I highly respect, her name is Tanya Jenka, and I respect her quite a bit. She's a really good friend as well. And it's funny, she was talking about the fact that how random backgrounds can get you into cybersecurity as well. She's like, I was just singing my heart out in this concert, and suddenly it's like, you should do cybersecurity, like you would be good at this. And I know another person who was a DJ. And to your point, it's all ends to me. It's all the end, and at the end, it's all a job, right? And we're all doing a job. Like if you were to compare this to any other job out there, probably not medicine, I feel, because that's life-threatening, or unless you work in one of those operational technology environments where I don't know, you're working in a nuclear plant, or that probably could be serious. But anywhere else, if it's a software or a phone or one of those ones where worse of worse, really, that can happen. Someone would not be able to dial a number. Great. Like he's alive or she's alive and they can still continue to DJ or jam or whatever they want to do. Like I definitely feel funny. I'm glad you mentioned the lucrative part. I didn't, because I was part of a panel once, and some similar question was asked about why should people join the cybersecurity, and I said the lucrative part, and people on the panel like, how much do you get paid? I'm like, I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess I paid decent enough, but I don't know. Like, how much do you guys get paid? Not enough, probably. But to your point, it's such an interesting topic because that also makes people think it's gated because you get paid so much. Because that's why all these super elite people who made it there are the guys and the girls who are getting paid so much because to Ashley's point, they've done all these certifications, they've spent so many years in this, and they know everything. But when you talk to these people, they're all down to earth. They all are happy to share information. You talk to them about, oh, I'm looking for a job. All you need to do, to Ashley's point earlier, is I guess if you can network early enough with people, find out what would make you more employable, whether it's a certificate or whether it's doing projects on GitHub or whether it's learning about cloud. Like, if you just find that information out, they would hire you. They would see the dedication that you're putting in. It would be foolish of someone to just ask you to do something and tell you like, well, that's not good enough, because they're the ones who told you in the first place. So, they'll definitely hire you. If no one else hires you, they would hire you. So 100%, man, it's a great field to be in.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I always feel as well, I mean, we kind of mentioned it about before about a skill shortage and stuff. And my personal opinion is that there's not necessarily a skill shortage. It's just that maybe we're articulating the wrong kind of skill set that we're looking for. And I honestly think that one of the core key skills that I look for when I recruit people and I look to kind of display myself is this communication factor of being able to translate. If you want to articulate a strategy to move to the cloud, well, coming out with all the fucking buzzwords about AWS and how transformation, digital blockchain, blah blah blah, that ain't going to get you nowhere. But if you can translate it into real terms that a CTO or a CIO can really understand, that's actually what is probably going to elevate your career quicker, because this that C-suite will be like, this guy knows what he's talking about. He speaks my language.
More relatable. 100%.
More relatable.
Otherwise, if the moment you talk about, I had this hack, which is I got the blue screen, and the CISO is like, the CIO is like, this guy's talking about some blue screen shit. Can you get him out of here? Who in this room can actually tell me what's really happening apart from the whole blue screen thing?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, it's fascinating.
It was interesting you say about cybersecurity being lucrative as a earning potential, and I do think there is an element where you can earn a decent amount of money very quickly or really early on in your career. But then there's also a flip side where there's a lot of organisations are not paying enough for the roles that they're putting out, so they're expecting a lot for very little. So I don't know what it's like in Australia. So if anyone doesn't realise you are Australian, or you at least you live in Australia, what is that kind of perspective? Do you have organisations out there that pay correct because they understand the field and how difficult it is, or they just pay the least as possible because maybe they don't view cybersecurity as that important to their business?
That's an interesting one. I think I'll probably put another spin to the. A short answer, yes, there are companies here who do not pay enough as well, and rightly so, because they're thinking more. So imagine if you're a small consulting company, and you obviously want to hire. I don't like calling people. I don't like calling people resources, but I'm going to use the word resources here. You want to have resources which would do a project for you. Now, as a consulting company, you can charge 10 times their daily wage to the client. You would try and minimize that consultant's cost to your own company so you can make more profit. So I think that it's not more the cybersecurity side, it's more the fact the business itself is trying to save money. And I feel the onus is on people like us to, when you do your research and find out, okay, this is what an average head of security or a CISO gets paid in this space, because it's different from our industry to industry as well. Like a bank would always pay you a lot more than, say, I don't know, a small startup. And even in the product companies as well, there's this different scales to it as well. A product company, which is like LinkedIn, may not pay you as much as, I'm just going to I don't know, think of another product company, I guess.
Salesforce.
Yeah, let's go Salesforce.
Yeah.
Although Salesforce apparently does pay well, but they really pay well for the sales guys for obvious reasons, because you want to be able to sell. Like, and then there is a whole, I feel like there is owners on both sides, and it does exist in every it doesn't exist in every business, though. I don't think it's just a cybersecurity thing. Although if they do choose to continue to pay a lot more to people in IT, but not much to people in cybersecurity, you definitely would have to question that, whether they don't really value cybersecurity. So I definitely feel there's a mix over here. Talking to a lot of people in the US, it seems to be there as well. And they always hope that when they tell you money, because everyone has a budget that they work with, right? A budget that they've approved for a role. They always try and save that, because then that means they can use some of that balance for something else. So I feel like, unfortunately, the capitalist economy we have created does limit our, I guess, options, for lack of a better word, especially if you're a product company where your funding is based on what the VC is providing you. Hopefully that answers your question, because I feel like there's definitely a balance there.
Yeah, it does. It definitely does, and it's just something that I found quite interesting in terms. You can look at a job spec, or that they'll say we're looking for a head of security, and they're paying the same what someone in a SOC would get paid, and you think, well, what? That doesn't make any sense. Like, what are you looking for here? Why are you looking for 12 years experience managing a team, but you're paying? You can get someone fresh out of university to do that role. Like, it doesn't make sense sometimes. And
the economies of scale, their maturity, security and maturity as well. Like maybe like where security is positioned within that business, you can probably get a good read on like the reporting line of, does the CISO have like a seat at the PLC table, or is it actually they're looking for an information security person to be the whole thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they just need an audit.
And sometimes just one person as well, to your point. Yeah. It's like they could be a head of security, or they could be director or VP, but there's only one guy or girl.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, you're like one person security team, and how much like money does your company make, or how many employees does your company have? Like, you have 800 people and one security guy. Like,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Like, so that never goes away. That unfortunately, I feel as a skill set, all of us are not taught in school how to negotiate or how to be okay to have a conversation about money. I really wish people were taught that. I mean, I tell my cousins about it. I tell everyone that I know about, you should be okay to talk about money. It's not wrong to talk about money, but the society just keeps reminding everyone, it's a taboo to talk about money. Yeah. Why would you talk about money? So when it actually comes time for you to get your salary, you're like, I guess this was the best option because they will be fair to me. I will take this. Thank you for giving me a job.
I've worked in the financial services space where you would literally have your employment terminated if you were to discuss with your colleague anything related to your salary. Like if you were overheard, I'm not even joking, if you were overheard talking about your salary, you would be out the door because they do not want anyone to discuss. And on the flip side, you see technology companies that I was literally reading last night a blog post, a Twitter post, a thread, and companies were sharing Google spreadsheets of all of their employees' salaries because they literally publish them. Like, Jim earns this and Billy earns this. And it's, there's so many different attitudes towards salary.
Where would you guys sit, though? Would you be okay if the salaries of all the employees were out in public knowledge?
I would, personally. Yeah. I would be so pro that. And the only reason why I don't, I remember posting something a little while ago on Twitter about, I posted a graph of my own personal salary journey over the last 10 years, not the numbers, but the percentage increase. Yeah. And the only reason I don't share the numbers because I don't think it's fair that other people in my organization that don't encourage you to share, the numbers, it wouldn't be fair for me to share mine and no one else, and everyone else judges me or what have you, puts them in an awkward position. but I think a more open culture would suit personal development a lot more.
Yeah.
I think personally,
and I think as a manager, you probably would see as well that there would be people in your team who would be not doing the same job but not paid the same as well. And I think I've had situations in the past where I see that and I feel like it's unfair, but you almost feel like, well, how do you have this awkward conversation that you're not being paid enough as Joe Blow over here? And I mean, how do you justify that? And I think that's why probably people are trying to just not have that conversation by, to your point, having a rule that you should not talk about salary. But to be honest, I'm with you, boys, that we should talk about salary, because that's how you know you're being paid fair. You don't have to read these random surveys on Glassdoor. Oh, I guess this is kind of what it would be. But then, it's a US version. So I don't know what's it in UK or what's in Australia. So I guess it'll be around this figure. Like, we're all making guesses for what it would be. But then you talk to the actual person, he's saying half of it. And you're like, but the Glassdoor review said this. And you're like, that's US. That's not Australia. That's not UK. And you're like, okay.
It works it's crazy, isn't it? It really is. Listen, this is a fascinating topic that honestly I could continue talking to you so long about. And you are a guest because of your passion. That you're very inspiring to speak to. You're super knowledgeable. I think we'll definitely have you back on the show if you'd like to come back. And we find this a lot, Ashley and I, that we speak to so interesting people that we just run out of time, and there's not enough time in the podcast to keep going and going. But we'll definitely make another episode with you, because not only to talk about your the history of where you got started and your passions and motivations, which I definitely want to explore more, but also to see the progress of your beard and how that's kind of getting on throughout lockdown. I want you to come back and show us what style it is next time as well.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll probably get the mustache going by next time. I'm going to be like just doing this the entire time.
Well, next time what we'll do is we'll get all of you cloud experts in a room. And you can just fight it out.
We should get Steve and Ashish on, because Steve, our first guest, he's got the biggest beard. He's someone I super respect.
Oh yeah, I saw that video. Oh my god, that's like, I don't know how many years he hasn't shaved for.
Oh man, I used to work with Steve, and you mentioned your wife does Muay Thai. Steve is into Muay Thai as well. So
really?
You guys would definitely be good friends, I think. So yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, that's how we solve arguments in my house, because put the gloves on it pretty much. Unfortunately, I don't know if I want to get into that part. So
I love it.
So I have to learn the skill as well.
Well, listen, on that note, you've been a great guest. Thank you for taking the time to join us. And I can't wait for everyone to hear this episode and learn about your journey and your insights into what it's like in InfoSec. So thank you.
Thank you.